Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. Another beautiful day outside. So we have our weekly update here for the city of Syracuse. I want to welcome our Deputy Mayor, Sharon Owens, who, Sharon, have you been for every one of these? Do you know? Have you missed any?
I missed one.
Okay, all right. Well, been with me for virtually all of these. And certainly happy to have you back today. I do want to acknowledge that we've now been doing these weekly updates for not sure exactly how many we've done, but we're gonna slow down the pace. It's a lot for the team to do every week, and thought maybe people are getting a little sick of hearing from me, so we're gonna after today, figured it's end of July. After today, we'll go to more of a monthly cadence. So next time, unless of course circumstances suggest otherwise, we'll probably do the next one late August. Want to acknowledge Common Council and thank them for the continued use of the chambers, as well as their participation in a number of these briefings. Also want to acknowledge our team, Ruth Neongran, Greg Lowe, Tejana Cerruti Brown, Brittany Farmer from Parks has been here every step of the way, other folks from our comms team, our maintenance team for getting everything all right, our interpreters who have been here with us. It's been a real team effort, and I think it's been good for the community and good for us to make sure that we're sharing information in an open and transparent way. So that's the goal for today, as usual. We'll go over the agenda real quick. Of course, update on COVID-19. We'll go through the data. We'll talk about planning for college student returns. We'll talk about the census, as we always do. We will go over our weekly COMPSTAT crime data, get into some specifics around some of that data, specifically as it relates to firearms recoveries and ghost gun regulation. And then we'll talk about Interstate 81, which we haven't talked about in a while, and we'll open it up for questions. So lots on the agenda. First, we'll get into the cases. Case numbers continue to look really good locally here. So we're up to 1,795 cases in the city of Syracuse. That's up 38 over the past week. That's a 2.1% increase. The increase in the prior week was 2.3, so that number is coming down. Total recoveries, 1,623. That's up 78 in a week, and that's a 5% increase. So recoveries doubled new cases. That's really good. Want to remind everyone that testing continues today at Syracuse Community Health Center until 5 p.m. and then tomorrow again at the Community Health Center from 9 to 5. Key part of the strategy is to make sure that people are getting tested. I gave blood. We had a blood drive here at City Hall this week, and the Red Cross included within the blood drive COVID antibody test. So I'm awaiting my results on that, and I'll keep everybody posted. But testing is very important. Looking at the state early warning monitoring dashboard, again, continues to tell a good story. Our new cases have stayed below 1%, and it is the second lowest positive case rate in the entire state, second only to the North Country. So again, we are still very much in the middle of a pandemic. The threat is real, and we need everyone to continue to do the right things. But by and large, we have, and I think that's reflected in the numbers. So certainly appreciative of the community's work there. Another statistic we continue to monitor is business affirmations as more businesses open up. And we are at 650 businesses in the city of Syracuse affirmed through the state's process. That's up 3.3% over last week. So I mentioned college students returning. It's crazy to think we're already at that point, but we are. Students are going to be returning to campuses in August, and actually freshmen that are quarantining at Syracuse University are going to begin arriving this Sunday. And people have asked me a lot about how I feel about students returning, and I think that our colleges and universities are an essential part of our community, and our students are a part of our community. And so understanding there are risks associated with bringing young people into Syracuse from around the country. Again, they're a part of our community. We welcome them back, and we're working very hard to make sure that it's done in a safe manner. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I mentioned we're working very closely with Syracuse University, also Lemoyne College. On on a number of different fronts. One of the areas with Syracuse University is obviously they have quite a bit of control over what happens on campus, but many students live off of campus, and so we have been working with the university, coordinating with university area landlords and property managers to make sure that we are educating and informing those individuals of the university and the community's policies, as well as helping them to educate and inform their tenants. The big concern, obviously, is large gatherings off campus. That's where we've spent a lot of our time talking about and thinking about. We're continuing that outreach beyond just landlords and property managers into neighborhood groups. We've had conversations with a number of neighborhood organizations, and will continue to, as well as some of our business organizations, Crouse Marshall Business District, downtown businesses. Obviously, they benefit greatly from patronage from students, but again, we want to make sure that it's done safely. And with Lemoyne, in addition to working with them on the health and safety front, we're actually developing a service leadership student internship program with Lemoyne that will ensure students continue to be an asset to the community and give them meaningful work experience that can serve them long after they're out of college. So really good, productive coordination. I mentioned the potential for large parties and other unhealthy situations. There is a law enforcement component to our collaboration. Syracuse Police Department is working very closely with SU Department of Public Safety to make sure that we have the appropriate response to situations. As they always do, Syracuse Police Department will enforce noise, the noise ordinance, nuisance parties, open containers, possession of illegal substances, and the Department of Public Safety will really be addressing violations specific to COVID-19 restrictions through the student disciplinary procedures. All students, as you may know, are being required to sign a student safety pledge. And again, it's going to be the responsibility of DPS to enforce adherence to that student safety pledge. Syracuse Police Department will continue its policy relative and practice relative to COVID-19, which is continuing to educate and inform. So again, the DPS will take it from there as it relates to COVID-19 restrictions. But those conversations are ongoing, and we think we have a good plan. I'm happy to answer questions after the fact on if there's more questions on students returning to campus. On the topic of the census, something that we've spent a lot of time talking about, probably talked about nearly every one of these briefings. I will note Deputy Mayor's shirt, which I love, Count All Queens. Deputy Mayor's doing her part to get the word out on census, and really the community's doing their part. I had lamented in recent weeks about the response rate really almost grinding to a halt, maybe getting a 0.1% week over week. But we did see a jump this past week. We are currently at 50.1%, so we hit that 50% threshold and got a little bit above it as of today. That's up from 49.5% last week. Buffalo is at 50%, so we're just a hair above Buffalo. Rochester's at 48.2%, and Albany's at 50.4%. So our upstate cities continue to be right around the same area. The jump from 49.5% to 50.1% is the biggest one-week jump we've had in about 2 months, and due in large part to the efforts from our team and from our partners in the community during this week, which is officially Census Push Week. So we've been holding awareness events, opportunities, generating opportunities throughout the community to increase awareness and to actually get people on site to fill out the census. Of course, we had a lot more of these types of events planned before the pandemic, but the pandemic has severely limited our ability to do this. What it shows is when we do, it can be very effective. And again, I want to thank Tori Russo, our census coordinator, her team, partners throughout the community for helping us to get that number up. We've got 2 more weeks of the self-response period before people start knocking on doors. And again, I think this past week shows what we can do when we get the word out. I also want to acknowledge and thank the media for your role in helping to get the word out. It makes a difference. So I want to see that continue over the next 2 weeks, and let's see how far we can get that number up before we have the enumerators knocking on doors. Again, we're in a pandemic. I don't want people knocking on my door. I'm sure you don't either. So fill out the census. Yesterday was Family and Friends Day. We can do that today too. Reach out to your family and friends. Pick 10 people, send them a text, give them the link. My Census 2020, and let's get these numbers up because we have a lot riding on it. It's really significant federal resources, not just for today or for a year from now, for 10 years. Couldn't be more important. So good work to the community, and let's keep it going for the next couple weeks. Okay, on the topic of crime, there's been a lot of discussion lately about crime, and we pride ourselves in being data-driven, and so we want to always point to the numbers that we report publicly and openly on a weekly basis. Just a reminder, the COMPSTAT crime report, especially because I won't be doing these briefings weekly, you can find every week updated on the syracusepolice.org website. Good news is, just as was the case last week, we're at a 10% overall decrease in crime year over year. That's good. That again is about the same as it was last week. When you dig down a little bit deeper, you see what's driving those numbers down is property crime, where we're down 13% year over year. And it's you don't need to look at the numbers to know where our challenge is. It's on violent crime. So year over year, we're just 1% above in violent crime, but you can, when you look a little closer at the numbers, you see where we're struggling. Homicides, and we lost another neighbor yesterday, and it's just tragic. The amount of people in our community, particularly our young people, that we lose every year to gun violence and just violence in general, it's a tragedy, and it's something that we are keenly focused on. Just since this report was posted, when it was posted on Tuesday, we were at 18 homicides. We're now up to 19, so it's actually about a 27% increase year over year. Last year at this time, we were at 15. Unacceptable. You can also see aggravated assaults at 15%. Not only are we dealing with homicides, we're dealing with a lot of people being shot and shooting. And that is certainly hurting our numbers, but more importantly, hurting the community. I do want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about the numbers. There's been some. I think that oftentimes people use the data and the numbers that support the narrative that they're trying to advance. For us, it's just about sharing data and information, allowing people to come to their own conclusions. But one piece of data that we have not shared publicly, but I think is really significant, especially in light of some of our challenges around gun crime, is firearms recoveries. So we know that there's more guns on the streets, and that's a real challenge for us. And it's not just here in Syracuse; it's across the country. We're seeing cities dealing with it all across the country. But the Syracuse Police Department is doing an extremely good job getting guns off the streets. If you look at just year over year, forget about the narrative. Let's look at the numbers. 2020 so far. Year to date, Syracuse Police Department has recovered 142 guns off the streets. 142. Last year at this time we were at 125. So anyone that's suggesting that our police officers are not being proactive, are not doing their jobs, or being limited in doing their jobs, what these numbers show is that our police officers are doing a very good job getting guns off the streets, and we need to continue to do that because there's way too many. Importantly, the department has made 21 more arrests with firearm recoveries than they did this time last year. So percentage of arrests associated with the recovery of the firearms you can see on the chart is 73% this year, whereas 67% last year. So we're not just getting the guns off the streets, we are arresting the individuals that are participating in the gun violence. So I just want to acknowledge the really good work of our police officers in the Syracuse Police Department in removing these threats from our community, and I know that they're going to continue it, and I appreciate it. To get into one more specific detail around the challenge of guns, we have an increasing challenge with ghost guns. I sent a letter this week to U.S. Attorney General Barr and the acting deputy director of the ATF, asking them to regulate ghost guns. So I talked about the 142 firearms that we've recovered. 25 of those have been ghost guns. That's a 30% increase in ghost gun recoveries over last year. And when you talk about the impact of ghost guns, I think the incident that stands out in my mind where I really began to focus on this issue was back in December 2019 when a 6-year-old boy was shot by his uncle, and that gentleman had a ghost gun, which is untraceable. So it is a significant problem that is really growing, and certainly my concern is growing along with it. So we are working with every town for gun safety on this issue. The specific request to Department of Justice and ATF is to update the definition of firearm components to prevent felons, minors, domestic abusers, and persons prohibited from possessing guns from getting the parts to make a gun at home without a background check. Right now, all of those categories of people have the ability to order the kits, the gun parts online without any background check and make a fully functioning, untraceable gun. Unacceptable, and the federal government needs to act immediately on it. Shifting gears, I do want to talk about Interstate 81. That's something that we've spent a lot of time talking about in recent years, but it had been a little quiet in recent months, and we saw a good step forward this week. New York State Department of Transportation has sent the draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS, to the Federal Highway Administration for review. That's a really important part of the process. FHWA is going to provide the majority of funding for this project, so we need to have them fully on board, and now they are in possession of the DEIS, which has been informed by a lot of public comment over the years. And once they finish that review, we'll be able to continue the process going forward. I think it's important when we talk about stimulus, when we talk about economic recovery, that what we have in the 81 project is a $2 billion infrastructure project, a nearly shovel-ready infrastructure project that can accelerate our recovery, and if done correctly, I'm going to talk more about this, if done right, has the ability to employ thousands of city residents and county residents, residents that historically have been marginalized in projects like this. But if we do this right, it can be transformational, not just for the community, but for residents in our community, and specifically in the city. So I want to talk a little bit more about how we're trying to make sure that happens. We are going to be hosting what we're calling the Interstate 81 Jobs Big Table meeting on Thursday, August 13th. This meeting will involve federal, state, and local government officials, business representatives, organized labor, and community stakeholders. The focus is on local hiring, making sure that our businesses and our workforce are prepared for this opportunity, and to maximize the local spending on contracting on public works projects. Again, we have a once in a generation opportunity, and we have to make sure that we get it right. The idea, the concept of a big table, which was brought to us from the community, is to make sure that all voices are heard in this process, not just elected official voices, not just the loudest voices, but all voices. Some of the panelists include our Assemblyman Bill Magnarelli, who's the Assembly Transportation Chair, really important partner for us. Council President Helen Hudson. Senator Gillibrand's office. Deputy Mayor has been very involved and will be there. Representatives of the Urban Jobs Task Force, a really important community partner that has been advocating for local residents for a long time around these types of opportunities, and a critical partner for us. Central and Northern New York Building Trades Council and the Council of Carpenters. We need the trades at the table, and we're not dragging them to the table. They are willingly coming to the table because they know it's good for their members and it's good for the community. So again, we're going to have all of those stakeholders at our virtual table for this meeting on August 13th. People interested will be able to tune into it via web conference. And again, we want to make sure that we are in a position to fully maximize this opportunity. Okay, before we open it up to questions, I want to turn it over to to Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens to talk about quality of life in our neighborhoods. Quality of life is a priority for this administration. It has been from the moment we walked through this office. We've undertaken a number of initiatives, most recently establishing a Quality of Life Commission. Deputy Mayor is leading the Quality of Life Commission. But we've also been quietly over the past few years conducting what we call neighborhood power walks. There's nothing that replaces boots on the ground, being in neighborhoods, talking to residents to see and to hear what's impacting people's lives. And we have, I think, I can speak for the Deputy Mayor and I both. It's one of our favorite things that we do in this job. Gives us an opportunity again to be in the community and with the community, and we've been able to make some significant improvements in people's lives in specific neighborhoods. So I'm going to turn it over to the Deputy Mayor just to talk a little bit more about our neighborhood power walks.
Yes, we began these power walks in 2018, the summer of 2018, with former Chief Fowler, and continued them every year since with Chief Buckner and the Mayor and I. We bring out all of the pertinent department heads, our Commissioner of DPW, our Director of Code Enforcement. We have individuals from our neighborhood planning, our communication staff, and most importantly, the police department. They're out there with us, walking around. The fire department, Chief Mons, oh my goodness, let me not forget them. They always have the good stuff, all the good token little trinkets that we hand out to the kids. And so every summer since 2018, we've been going out doing this. And what comes out of it, I got my armor with me. I got my phone with me. The mayor has his phone with him, and I'm taking pictures of vacant houses. I'm taking pictures of illegal set-outs, and I'm sending them in real time. Whether or not they looked at our calendar, departments know when we're out there in those neighborhoods, because we are sending out information and expecting results within a day or two. And many times by the time we leave the neighborhood, somebody has gotten out there to address a legal set out or to address. We, more than anything, the mayor and I just recently drove by a corner, a situation, and I think we hit DPW and codes at the same time, saying somebody needs to get out there and take care of that, because it just was a mess and unacceptable in our community. So we're going to continue this. COVID, like everything else, got us started a little late. This summer, we were out on in the Hudson Rich Street area Tuesday, and we're going to be getting out on our calendars. We're going to try to do it at least a couple times every month during the summer into the cooler months to continue getting out. So we're coming to a neighborhood near you very soon.
Thanks, Sharon. While the Deputy Mayor and I really enjoy these walks, I'm not sure our department heads always do, because they walk away with long to-do lists, but they get the work done, and it's really important. The reason we wanted to talk about this is because, not because we're looking for attention. Again, we don't give advance notice on these. We just show up, and oftentimes some neighbors get a little concerned and say, "Is everything okay?" and are thrilled to hear why we're there. But to have the police department, the fire department, other department heads and representatives in the neighborhoods, we think is really important because we see all of the things that you all see. Trust me when I tell you the illegal setouts, the overgrowth, the illegal dumping, all of these quality of life issues that drive you all crazy, drive us crazy too. And we're working very hard not only to address them during these walks and on a day-to-day basis, but really, and frankly, the hard part of this job that's harder than I think I realized walking in is dealing with the systems that will allow us to do a better job addressing these in the long term. So it's addressing the immediate issues, but then trying to rework the underlying systems similar to what we did in the permitting process that we talked about this week to make sure that we do a better job. We've got a lot of work to do, but quality of life is a priority. We've got a lot of other competing priorities. Of course, the pandemic, and we've spent a lot of time on police reform and accountability, and for good reason. But when we're all done working, we go home and we lay our heads in the city, and we're residents. And again, we see and hear all the same things that everybody else does, and are working really hard to address them. So hopefully, we'll see you all in your neighborhood soon. Covered a lot of ground there fairly quickly too, but we do have time for questions, so we'll open it up now. Microphone's in the back, and looks like we got our first one.
You kind of addressed it in an overall perspective regarding the fact that the students will be coming to SU. First, are there concerns? SU's reputation as a party school has been widely known the last 5-10 years. Are you concerned with the influx of freshmen coming in? Because I think we all know freshmen kind of half listen to things. Are you planning some sort of seminar with orientation to them to kind of stress don't have these parties? And are you also talking to Chief Buckner about just making sure that the neighborhoods are being checked a little more often than normal?
Well, the good news is the freshmen are going to be here first. So usually as a freshman, if you remember, you have to rely on the upperclassmen for the parties, and they won't be able to do that in this case. No, in all seriousness, are we concerned? Absolutely, we're concerned. We wouldn't be spending as much time engaging with the universities and the stakeholders if we weren't concerned. We are relying on the university to communicate and engage with the students, and we are simply there as playing a supportive role. I talked about the role of the police department. Again, police department and DPS have had to deal with parties for a long time. We know what our roles are there. DPS really has to be the front line. But COVID is another element to it, and I credit the university for, I think, putting an infrastructure and a framework in place that does everything possible to hold students accountable, and the ramifications for violating these policies are significant. And so, yeah, at that age, young people are always going to make mistakes and give us reasons to be concerned, but I think we're doing everything in our power to make sure that they come back here in a safe way, because again, we do want them back, but we need them to be responsible and safe.
Thank you so much for the time. How would you classify the community's relationship with police at this moment?
A work in progress. And I think that's always going to be the case. And I think that you have to acknowledge that there's different parts of the community that have different relationships with the police. There are some neighborhoods that feel like they are in a police state because they see police everywhere, largely related to crime. And you see other neighborhoods where you almost never see the police, and to the point where we hear from residents that would like to see them more. I've acknowledged that as a generally privileged white man, I have a certain relationship with law enforcement that that not everyone has, and particularly, just historically, and this isn't, anything specifically about the Syracuse Police Department. We know historically that communities of color have had challenged relationships with law enforcement. So we need to be open and honest about that and acknowledge that, and then work really hard to build those bridges in every part of our community. When you look at the process that we took and that the deputy mayor led to select our chief, it was a process driven by community engagement, and it prioritized improving the relationship between the community and the police department. We selected Chief Buckner because we thought, among other things, that he was in the best position to do that, and we feel that we've made progress there, but it's always going to be a work in progress, and it's a priority.
Yesterday, Jeff Piedmont released a statement taking aim really at you and Chief Buckner. And Chief Buckner, he quotes Chief Buckner as saying that the police need to be more proactive. And he also says that the crime reduction team, which is a proactive unit, which was eliminated by your administration and the chief, he claims was eliminated for political reasons. I'm sure you would dispute that, but can you get into any detail about why the CRT was eliminated?
Sure. So there's a lot to say there. First, I will say that that those statements yesterday do not help the relationship between the police and the community. They don't. So that's a concern. To get to the specific issues raised, the crime reduction team, at the time, Chief Buckner made a decision, as he was still relatively new on the job, evaluating the needs of the department. It was his opinion that where we needed officers most was on patrol, regular patrol. So he made the decision at the time to take the officers involved with the CRT, as well as the officers that were previously assigned specifically in community policing, to go to patrol, because that's where he felt they were needed most. At the time, he said, he acknowledged that every police department needs to have proactive policing units, whether they're permanent units or temporary units based on need. And since shifting the CRT officers into patrol, the police department has continued to do proactive policing units, just not in the way that they were done previously. We made one other point that I wanted to speak to. I'm not recalling now, but the fact is that that's why the decision was made. Police department continues to do proactive policing. We're looking at new and different ways to do it, and I think as the evidence that I provided in the form of gun recoveries, of firearms recovery, shows. I remember the point now. That shows that that the police are being proactive, and I think that those numbers again support that the police department is working very hard. The police officers are working very hard, and when the chief said we need to be more the police need to be more proactive, that wasn't him speaking to suggesting that his officers weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. That was him talking about himself as the chief, saying we need to be more proactive, and that's that there's a lot that goes into that decision-making process. The chief has been very open and honest that at the height of at the beginning of the pandemic, just like almost every other industry, the police department had to shift down a few gears, and in the interest of protecting the health of the officers in the community, they were limiting their interactions with the public. For a while, that worked, and crime was relatively low, and then we saw the crime start to spike. So as the chief, using the analogy that the chief used, he had to shift it up a couple gears, and they've done that. And you can, again, it's reflected in many of the numbers. And at a time now where we have seen a spike in homicides and gun crime, they're likely going to shift up another gear. But when you do that, that presents other challenges. It increases the likelihood that there's going to be interactions between the police and the and community members that may not be productive, that could result in use of force. So there's pros and cons to those different decisions being made. But I can tell you, the decisions that are being made in the police department are not being made because of political pressure. They're being made because they're the right thing to do. That's what I brought the Chief Buckner in to do, and that's what he's doing.
Last one, guys, I promise. I want to read you a quote from his statement and just get a response from you and ask a question, actually. To make matters worse, our detectives are receiving very little assistance from the community. If anybody believes that we are receiving cooperation, they're badly mistaken. What needs to be done to improve the cooperation of citizens with police? He's referring to the Rite Day shooting.
Well, so specific to that incident, I can't argue with that. But to suggest that we don't get cooperation from the community, that's patently false. And I can say that not as a police officer, but as someone that engages with the police department, with our police officers. We get help from the community all the time. Would we like to get more? Of course we would. Am I sympathetic to some of the reasons why community members don't always cooperate? I am in certain cases. But again, I'll go back to my statement. The statement that you read not only doesn't do anything to improve police-community relations, it hurts them.
Mayor, if I can.
Please.
That point that was made is completely coming from a perspective of an individual or individuals who don't live in the community that you're seeking the feedback from. If an individual is afraid to come to the police, then we have to find other ways to make them comfortable coming to us. But to make the individual you're seeking to get the information, if you don't lay your head down in a neighborhood in which there's a crime that's been committed or repeatedly committed, if you don't lay your head in that neighborhood, you have no clue what it's like to be able to say who did what when. And so I think that's completely unfair to individuals who live in communities if you don't live in that community.
So, Deputy Mayor, that begs the question, do you support mandatory police residency in the city of Syracuse?
I'm a proponent of residency.
As am I, Sam. I don't think there's ever been any question about it.
No question about it.
We negotiated into a contract that wasn't approved, and now we're looking at the possibility of changing state law to get city residency. Am I going to require, if we get city residency, will I require immediately that all 400 police officers move into the city? I don't think that that's practical. But would I support requiring city residency of police officers going forward with new officers? Yes.
And let me just add.
I'm apologetic about that.
I'm sorry. And let me just add that answer doesn't address what I said before, because if you live in a neighborhood that has repeated gunfire and you live in a neighborhood who doesn't, whether you're in the same city or not, you still don't understand the perspective.
And again, if we want to talk about supporting our officers, let's talk about the 142 firearms that they've taken off the street. Let's talk about the incredible solve rate that our detectives have in our homicides. There's plenty of good ways to highlight the good work of our officers and the difficult work that they do, and we try very hard to do that. What you just read to me doesn't do that.
Great. Thank you very much for your time, guys.
Thanks.
Wow. Okay.
Ken?
Well, I find myself probably the oldest person in the room. I feel like Bill Clinton. But hopefully I will be a little bit more uplifting than he was yesterday. One of the things that I remember as a child growing up in Syracuse, that whether it was the mayor, whether it was the fire chief, used their bully pulpit to give messages. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? I believe that people are ready for a strong message because of the leadership that's not coming in from the national government and how many people are depending on both the governor, you, our county executive, to give us to really lead us. And then I have a follow-up regarding Mr. Piedmont. And that is, as an African-American journalist, the words that he puts out frightens the people that speak with me. The words that he puts out will make people say, I do not want to speak with the police because the person who's speaking to me is speaking at me and not as a partner. And what we hear a lot of is simply the PBA's side and what they want. And at some point, when are we going to tell them that they work for us? And those are my 2 points.
No,
really using the bully pulpit to pretty much say to Piedmont, you're pouring kerosene on a fire, and then yelling fire,
Right.
and then wondering why the fire department isn't there.
Yeah.
It seems like, as a journalist, that there's a lot of irresponsibility going on when you take kerosene and pour it on a situation that's already hot. How can we change that?
I couldn't have, I can't add anything to what you said, Ken, and again, I'll just reiterate that those comments are not helpful to the officers or to those that we serve, and I will use this platform and this bully pulpit to make that point every chance I get. And also, Ken, just the other point that I wanted to make is that I think you brought up a good point about, it's 11 o'clock, where are your kids? That I think is relevant, especially in the discussions that we've been having around police reform and police accountability, is that the law enforcement, and specifically in Syracuse, the Syracuse Police Department, is not going to solve the problems that ail us. They can help hold people accountable for the things that they can do, and they can, to a certain extent, help us hopefully reduce crime. But that's why we work so hard on issues around education and housing and financial empowerment and all of the other underlying conditions that create an environment where crime thrives. But if we're going to talk about all of these problems, we need to extend our discussion beyond law enforcement and look in the mirror and decide what role you're playing or should be playing to help this community. Good.
Hey, switching gears a little bit. Earlier you mentioned I believe it was a letter that you sent to landlords in the University Hill area, just with some more, I guess, guidelines about handling COVID. Are you able to elaborate just the communication you've had with off-campus landlords? Are you able to give them any guidelines or mandates for, I guess, how they intake students or how students move in? Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so we didn't send a letter, but we did have a meeting recently with the landlords. Was that this week, Greg? Yeah, this week. So it was university representatives, city representatives, and landlords and property managers. I think that the primary purpose was just to make sure that they were aware of what the university's expectations were, and about the role that the city and the police department were going to play in holding students and property owners accountable. And so it's more just about keeping an open line of communication. As I've said from the beginning, there's no playbook here, and while we have some landlords and property managers that are better to work with than others, I think that they all recognize that this is a real challenge that could have, if not handled properly, not only can have a negative impact on the health of students and of the community, but also on their bottom line. It is in their best interest to keep students here in the community, and if we don't do our jobs right, we risk that, and no one wants that to happen. So I think that there's some real common ground to work from, and again, it was just more about making sure everyone had the same information, everyone understood each other's roles and responsibilities.
And you mentioned earlier that the city's role was more of a supportive role to help SU enforce, what they're going to enforce, any guidelines. But what does that supportive role entail in regards to disciplinary processes for, added restrictions to off-campus parties or gatherings? What role will the city play in that regard?
Yeah, the DPS is responsible for the student disciplinary process, not Syracuse Police Department. So if student behavior rises to the level of criminal behavior that the police department has to engage with, then as we have historically done, they'll do that. But student disciplinary issues and issues related to COVID, we're looking to the university and specifically to DPS to enforce that.
And so who's been your main point of contact within the SU administration in just playing that supportive role? I guess where's that line of contact been?
I talked to Chancellor Severud. So he has a big team, and I spoke to the Chancellor last week. His senior officials are working with our senior officials, and it's a team effort.
And just last thing, just with going back to the off-campus landlords, I guess, is the city able to give any guidelines or mandates for how off-campus landlords operate? I guess what's your purview there? And yeah.
I mean, we have our standard local laws. We have our rental registry. We have code enforcement. We have law enforcement. So none of that has changed. Again, as it relates to specific issues around COVID, the police department's approach has been to educate and inform, and if they're responding to issues involving students and COVID, then that will be the role that they play. But if it extends beyond just education and information, then it will be DPS to hold those students accountable for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good.
So my question is particularly going back into the police. I personally think that police officers have a huge responsibility, but also are being very pressured at this time, and with COVID and how things are being operated. So we're just going back, living in a community, as she would say, I laid my head on a community that's very aggressive and very, misportrayed, and also I find it very, interesting with the conversation. So my question is, despite how cops are, and I would say police officers are in the community, they also lack with community relationship, as you would say. Someone from a different place might not understand the environment, and sometimes having also encountered with a police officer, I also have my bad side of it, but I personally don't label every police officer as a bad person. How would you, what is the police officer department is doing to train someone that's coming from a different resident to really know how to speak to a particular community, even though you've been just, came into the police department just a few days ago?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do. It starts in the academy, and we just welcomed an academy class into the department. And when you look at the things that they went through, from learning about de-escalation, learning about how to engage with people with mental health issues, engaging with the community and being in the community throughout the academy. There's some baseline level training that we provide. I think where we're looking for opportunities to do more and to do better is, once officers are in the department, what are the things that we're doing going forward? And you've seen some good examples of. You've seen the police department bring an ice cream truck to different neighborhoods. We've been talking about what would it take to get a police athletic league going again in the city. Where can we, the power walks are another example. Any ways in which we can get our community members and our police together in productive ways. I think police officers know better than anyone that oftentimes when they're dealing with our constituents, they're dealing with them in a crisis. It may be the worst moment of that individual's life, and I think we've all been in bad situations and when we're not at our best. But that's why we provide the training. That's why we try to provide these opportunities for positive engagement, because there are going to be moments when people aren't at their best, and when they're not, we still need our officers to be. So it's an ongoing process. Again, it starts in the academy, it continues with in-service training. You may have seen in my executive order recently, we talked about educating officers on the history of racism, both in this country and in this city, and especially for those that may not be from the community, to be informed and to have some historical context for the situations that they may find themselves in. So it's an ongoing process, but it's one that we're working really hard on.
One last question. Just speaking on the census situation with the how things are going. Obviously, we have a better percentage now going up for the last 2 months. For the last 2 months you mentioned. Just what do you think we need to improve on? What community and what community basis area do you think that's lacking of just being participant in the census?
So it's just, I think there's a number of things. We know that in the city of Syracuse and in a lot of other cities, you have what are considered hard to count populations. There's a number of different barriers. People that are living in poverty, are worrying about how they're going to get their next meal on the table, or how they're going to get their kids basic needs. It's hard to ask people in those situations to focus on something other than what they need, to survive. New American communities, people that that may not have a lot of trust in our government, or may have language barriers or cultural barriers. There's a lot of different challenges. So what we've been trying to do is just break down those barriers, build trust, and that's why we need. Again, the city of Syracuse can't do it alone. We need community partners, and we're thankful that we have many that can act as credible messengers, that can ensure people that they can trust the process, that information isn't going to be used against you in any way. So, again, socioeconomic barriers, trust barriers, there's a lot of challenges, but we're continuing to work through them and trying to connect the dots between the communities and the individuals that we're engaging, and how the census, participating in the census, can result in us getting more resources to help these very same communities. And yeah, it's a challenge, but we're working really hard on it. Thanks. Chris.
Mayor, somebody earlier asked you to characterize the relationship between the police and the community. Could you characterize your relationship right now with the police union?
A work in progress. Listen, I despite the fact that we disagree often, I've maintained an open line of communication, not just with the union president, but with the board. I met with members of the union board a couple weeks ago, along with the chiefs. So as I've said, my approach to this job, whether I'm dealing with the PBA, the community, other elected officials, is we're not always going to agree, but I'm always going to maintain an open line of communication and always come back to the table, and the PBA is no different. You're
Fighting them in court right now, and there's a few disputes going on. Do you consider them an obstacle to police reform? It's hard to make broad brushing statements. There are areas where we disagree, and in those areas, that's an obstacle. So overall, I think we need the PBA to get where we need to get to, and so for that reason, we're going to continue to work with them. But again, there's plenty of areas where we disagree, and that I try to remind myself that the PBA has really one job, and that's to look out for what they believe to be the best interests of their officers. My job is to look out for the best interests of those who I serve. I consider officers among those stakeholders, and I've said this many times before. The union president has his way of doing what he believes to be in the best interest of the officers and supporting the officers, and I have mine. And the numbers that I shared and the comments that I made today are my ways of supporting the officers. And again, we're gonna keep at it. It's definitely a work in progress, and it's challenging at times, but I'm not deterred by that.
Just to go back to something you mentioned when we were talking about residency, you mentioned state law. I know there's a proposal from some legislators out of Buffalo to amend state law. Is that what you're referring to, or is there something local or something you're pursuing to change state law regarding residency?
I do intend to pursue a similar measure for the city of Syracuse. You know, we're still in the process of making sure that we're communicating with our state delegation and that we're all on the same page. But it is my intention to seek change in state law that would allow us to enforce a residency requirement on the Syracuse Police Department.
So that would come from our delegation?
Presumably, again, we're still we're working through those questions right now.
Okay. Last one, SROs, police officers in schools. You told protesters a few weeks ago, or activists, that you'd begin discussions next week about what to do. What's your plan? Do you have an idea of what you'd like to see happen with the SROs?
Well, the school district, which again, as it relates specifically to the demand, I think we've made it clear that it's ultimately a decision that the school district has to make in conjunction and in partnership with us. And the school district has started that process. They had their working session. I've been in touch with the superintendent and some of the board members since that time. We do have a meeting scheduled, I think, next week, Sharon, with representatives of the district to both, I think, have an open conversation about where we stand right now, but also to more clearly define what that process looks like. I think that we acknowledge that improvements and changes need to be made. I think that there's legitimate concerns about what is being asked of some of our school resource officers in our schools, and they're in there. They should be in there to enforce criminal activity, not behavioral problems. And I think sometimes that line gets blurred. So I see this, whether or not officers remain in the schools or not. These are things that need to be addressed, and this process will give us the opportunity to address them, and hopefully will lead us to a final outcome. But I think everyone is in general agreement that improvements need to be made in that process. Deputy Mayor, anything you want to share? Or I covered it.
Just that we're meeting next week. I've been forthcoming with the superintendent that my concern is how the resource officers are used. To the mayor's point, they're trained to solve crime and enforce law, not to manage behavior. And educational professionals go to school for a long time to understand how to educate young people and the development of young children and teenagers. Law enforcement, police officers aren't trained for that. So we have to find a balance that protects our students, protects the staff, and puts our officers in a position that they are doing what they're trained to do, and that is not managing behavior.
So just, if I'm hearing right, then you're not planning on advocating one way or another for, yes, we want officers out of the schools, or yes, we want them to remain in the schools?
Right.
My perspective is that what is happening right now I don't think is in the best interest of everybody that's involved in the situation. The officers, the students. Clearly we heard from community members that there is a concern, and we've heard from other community members that there needs to be security in the schools. So the question would be, to the mayor's point, and he's been making it all along, is that we have to address the issues, concerns that we have, concerns that the district has, and put together a plan for what I am glad that we're having the conversation, because if not for the demand and the conversation around SROs, we wouldn't be pulling apart an onion about actually how officers are used in the schools. I think that this is going to be a productive conversation moving forward. On top of the fact that we don't even know what school is going to look like. We think we know what school is going to look like in the fall and who's going to be in session and who not. who will not be, which will play a huge role, at least for the first 2 semesters of school.
And I would just add that, again, on the topic of what's, certainly, we need to be looking at what's in the best interest of the kids and our other stakeholders in schools, but to the question of what's in the best interest of our officers, in my conversations with officers, including some school resource officers, they want that clarity too. That I think that they want to be put in a position to be successful and to do their job right, and I think that there's, that we need to make sure that what we're asking of all of our officers, as long as they are in school, is consistent. And again, to Deputy Mayor's point, this conversation has given us an opportunity to re-examine that.
Thank you both.
Hi, Mayor. Just one question circling back to students returning to campus. Obviously, the students are a large part of the Syracuse population, especially when they are back in town. But what is your word of encouragement for people who do live here permanently who may have those concerns of them coming back?
Just that we share those concerns and we're taking them very seriously and spending a lot of time engaging with the universities and other stakeholders to make sure it's done safely. Because again, having students here is good for the community. They're a part of our community. And when we look at economic recovery, having students here can help that. But it has to be done in a way that prioritizes everyone's health and safety, existing community and students. And so, again, I think what most constituents that I've spoken with want to know is that we are taking it seriously and that we do have concerns and we're addressing them, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Thanks.
Shifting gears, went down last weekend to see how the dining at Armory Square went. Are you looking at the possibility of making this, I know it's Syracuse, you can't do it 12 months a year, but maybe making it a permanent during the summer situation where you cut off those areas on Walton Street and do that? And also, is there plans for, I know you talked about it, but definitive plans for like Hanover and other areas to open up to kind of these outdoor dining areas?
So relative to Armory, I'm completely open-minded there. We have gotten a lot of really positive feedback about closing off those 2 blocks of Walton Street. It's something, I went to Ithaca College, so I spent a lot of time in the Commons in Ithaca, and I always wondered whether or not that was something that we could do here in Syracuse. And Walton Street has always been kind of the most obvious potential choice, but you have to balance what's in the best interest of the businesses and other stakeholders in the neighborhood. Especially now with COVID, businesses are struggling, and so we wouldn't want to do anything to hurt them. But right now, it's helping them, and I do think we've been having conversations with the county long before COVID. There is going to have to be some infrastructure work done on Walton that may give us an opportunity to re-examine what that street looks like. But it's working right now, and that's great. And as long as it continues to work, we'll continue it. In Hanover Square, I have to keep reminding people that East Genesee Street, which is the other street that doesn't really feel like a street, has been closed. That was the first street that we closed. And I walked through there last night, and the restaurants on that side were using it and benefiting from it. Water Street it's something that we've discussed, and no definitive plans yet, but certainly something that we would entertain as we would in any other part of the city. Again, I encourage other business districts, other restaurants. If you see a piece of public right-of-way that you're not currently using, but you would want to use in a way that benefits your business, then let's talk.
Hi, Mayor. Just circling back to the idea of students coming back, what is the city's role going to be in terms of if there was a potential outbreak at one of the college campuses, whether it be SU or Lemoyne or OCC? Do you have a particular role in this, or is it more up to the actual school itself to try to solve that situation?
Well, the university, I think I have it with me here. This is their plan. Response to New York State Department of Health, Syracuse University. In here, they have different levels of infection rates and of spread that that lead to different outcomes, from adjustments in particular buildings and departments to a full-on pause and even a discontinuation of on-site learning. So that's really between New York State and the university, and based on my my review, it looks like a good plan. And as we've done from the beginning between Onondaga County and the city, we'll certainly be supportive, and the county with the health department has an important role to play as well. But nothing is specifically relating to the city. Nothing unique or special beyond that. Okay, it's Friday. Everyone have a great weekend. Be safe, and we'll see you next month, but hopefully sooner. Take care.